You can go over to Infowars.com and listen to it for free. I do want to make one point to the last caller. Hopefully he is still listening in before we go to Ray McGovern. Just because somebody's African American does not mean that they can't be part of this globalist system, a part of this quote-unquote New World Order. Let me read you something off the Harvard University website, the Gazette News, from September 27th, 2001. Now, this is basically 2.5 weeks after 9/11, because you did just mention people like, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., a great man, but then you mentioned people like Al Sharpton and, you know, other people who were under suspicion. And of just being corrupt. I mean, not necessarily being part of any globalist organization, but very corruptible. All right, this is what Jesse Jackson had to say in front of Harvard University 2.5 weeks after 9/11. "It is easy to handle triumph. Can we handle trouble or disaster?" said Jackson. "Let us rise together for hope, healing, and a vision for the new world order." And he uses this term all the time. He's not the only guy. So I just wanted to bring that up to Jamil. Look into it. Like I said, I'm voting for an African-American candidate for president. On November 4th, 1 week from today, I will be voting for Cynthia McKinney, the Green Party candidate for president. I encourage people not to waste their vote and vote third party. I disagree with Tarpley. I don't think getting McCain into office is probable or possible unless, you know, the elitists really want that and they rig the voting machines to do so. All right, without further ado, we're going to bring on Ray McGovern, the 26-year CIA analyst. He debriefed people like Dick Cheney and others in the 80s. His latest editorial is Attack on Iran Off the Table, and he really goes after the Washington Post for really putting a downswing on it, like it's a bad thing that the attack on Iran may be off the table both here and in Israel. Thanks for joining us, Ray.
You're welcome, Jason. Glad to be with you.
Now, Ray, you know, before we get into this editorial, Election Day's a week away. You know, I interviewed you a little over 2 years ago, right in the run up to the 2006 election, and we talked about the Democratic Congress getting in and possibly emboldening them. 2 years later, we're not out of Iraq. I mean, obviously there are Democrats that I want to see, and I'd love to see Cindy Sheehan take Pelosi's seat. Oh, man, that would be a huge triumph. But give me your take on the election right now.
Well, if I take 5 steps back, Jason, I say to myself, wow, I thought it was going to be a choice between a McCain-type person and Mrs. Clinton. That would have been a real problem for me. I never thought that I would have a candidate running who has said sensible things about Iraq, had said less than sensible things about other things, but certainly, in my view, you have to look at what the alternative is, and I noted your advice to people and your own decision to support my good friend Cynthia. However, I would ask people to reflect on what that could mean, because that happened once before. Lots of people supported a third-party candidate, and we got George W. Bush. So think hard about that before you waste your vote.
And you're obviously talking about Ralph Nader, who has run in the previous 2 elections and also in this one, correct?
For whom I also have great respect. It's just that the realities are such that they're very troublesome things and they intrude, and I just still can't get over it.
But I think my problem with Barack, though, is this. He does talk about a de-escalation in Iraq, but that's been on the table for some time now, and it never seems to go through. And, you know, we had Webster Tarpley on a couple hours ago, and he really talked about how Obama is talking about possibly an invasion or a bombing of Pakistan to go after the remnants of the Taliban or Al-Qaeda and bin Laden, and that could cause a whole new situation in the Middle East and Eurasia.
Yeah, Jason, again, I know Webster. I think what one has to do is be really careful about taking campaign rhetoric as a sign of real intention. I mean, look at what Obama has said about Israel, for example. I mean, it's almost sickening how the candidates vie among themselves to tell the American public who loves Israel the best. Joe Biden trying to outdo everyone else by saying, yeah, we all love Israel, but I love Israel with a passion, you know? I mean, that's really ridiculous. So you expect that kind of rhetoric. from Obama, from anybody. And when he talks about, about Afghanistan, for example, he has to sort of show the American people how tough he is. That he is up to the task, particularly military task. But I would fully expect, and I've been wrong about these kinds of things before, but I would fully expect that once were he to be in office, that the people that he would gather around him would tell him what a feckless exercise not only Iraq but Afghanistan has been, and that the history dictates that no one wins this kind of battle or occupation, and he would come to his senses. So I'm not willing to address what Obama says about these things as though they should be taken at face value.
So you do think that he's somewhat genuine, and there's a possibility that these aggressions in the Middle East will subside after he's elected and he puts in an administration that you feel would de-escalate the war?
Well, yeah, I have, the notion of the candidate who says, 100 years, no problem, coming into office turns my hair on end. I don't think that a fellow who's made his reputation by crashing airplanes and getting shot down has shown any real acuity with respect to policies to be crafted or followed. And so it's a matter of compared to what, finally. And, when I look at the Democratic candidate, and you look at the debates, there's a fellow with a cool head, easy and eager to learn, and I think he's teachable. I think he will probably avoid the mistakes of predecessors who thought they could come into Washington and diss the people in the press and others with whom you really have to sort of work out a compromise so that they will give you half a chance to have your message heard. And, it's going to be not a very hard act to follow. I mean, these 8 years have been a disaster for our country. And, just as my friend Bobby Gates, the Secretary of Defense, just as he followed Rumsfeld and had like a 2-year honeymoon, so too, I think, whoever replaces Bush, presumably if it's the favored contender, that he will have a honeymoon period where people will just so delighted to listen to a person who just conceivably might tell the truth on occasion, that if he's of a mind to, and I'm hopeful he is, he can change these crazy policies.
Well, I don't share your optimism. I feel like he is the slicker candidate by far. He's obviously more well-spoken. When John McCain comes out and talks about a 100-year war, or he talks about us being the enemy, I mean, I think you can kind of see the senility in his face. He doesn't look the healthiest. I can't even believe that they've put him up there. Honestly, in the run-up to this, I thought that they would go with someone more like a Romney. McCain's establishment, and the Palin pick, I mean, it's bizarre. It's not like he has a strong ticket. It's almost like they're throwing the election. I mean, do you really think that McCain has a shot at winning this?
This is not my field of expertise, Jason. I'm just, my opinion is, in this area, is not worth anything more than the next person's. But, there are so many variables and so many shenanigans been played over the last couple of elections that I would encourage anyone who is as afraid as I am of Palin and McCain to make sure not only that their vote is taken, but that their vote is counted. All
right, well, let's jump to this Iran situation. You wrote this editorial. We've discussed Iran at length on the radio, in TV interviews with you, InfoWars, and myself. Do you really think right now we are off the table with Iran? It looks like there will not be a war of aggression out there?
Yes, I do, Jason. And I say that as one who, for 3 years, was saying that chances were at least equal, and probably greater than equal, that Bush and Cheney, to fulfill their promise to Israel, would, quote, take care of Iran. What's changed? Well, there are a bunch of things that have changed. One is that the senior uniformed military in this country have shown a little guts for a change. We had Admiral Fallon resigning after saying, we're not going to do Iran on my watch. resigning rather than letting himself be on the receiving end of an idiotic order to start a war with Iran and risk the fortunes and lives of all those troops he has in Iraq, Afghanistan, and in the Gulf. He didn't want to put himself in that position, and so he in effect quit by going to the press and saying, "We're not going to do Iran. That would be crazy." Now, Admiral Mullen, Mike Mullen, who came in, I was an Army officer, so it's really hard for me to say these good things about Navy admirals. But Admiral Mullen, man, that guy's got guts that we haven't seen. He comes back from Israel and says it would be very foolish to open yet a third war, a third front in that part of the area. And then we later learned that we learned this from the Israeli press. I mean, you don't learn anything like this from the American press, or what I call the fawning corporate media. We learned from the Israeli press